So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for joining us today at our annual Diversity and Inclusion Conference run by the Royal Academy of Engineering. And if you're joining us online and haven't managed to participate in our previous panel, you've missed a great panel. But also, I'm Hayaatun Sillem, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Royal Academy of Engineering and the Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering Foundation. And I'm thrilled to have been part of today's conversations. It's been genuinely inspirational to hear from our speakers today and to be able to spend time with some of the colleagues who are in the room physically, sharing stories, expertise on what works in diversity and inclusion, and a real joy, a real treat to share this collective space with such an enthusiastic, committed, curious and engaged audience, both in the room and online. Thank you so much for all your participation in this event, whether it's been in person or online. Thank you all for your commitment to this topic as well. I think in many ways now feels like an important moment to take a collective breath, to reflect and to regroup. These past 2 years of living through a global pandemic have tested all of us in so many different ways. And I suspect that many of us consider ourselves to be the lucky ones, but even we must have felt the huge dimension of test and challenge impacting on almost every aspect of our life. And despite the absolutely undeniable pain and loss, I think that many of us also feel a degree of pride in how the engineering community, along with so many other professions, have risen to the challenge of using our skills and our expertise to support societal needs, and especially in applying those skills in such challenging circumstances. And then, of course, as we emerged in what we hoped would be this kind of spring of positivity and optimism, we find ourselves plunged into a new and truly shocking period of global turmoil and tragedy. But for those of us who have the privilege of choosing how we respond intellectually and emotionally to this period, I think it's an important time to pause, to reflect on where we are and to think about where we want to go from here. And that's particularly true in the diversity and inclusion space. As Sarah acknowledged at the start of the day, there's been an eruption in the number and scale of diversity and inclusion initiatives over this past decade. This enthusiasm, this spirit of innovation has been absolutely wonderful to see, so uplifting, and the process of trial and error has undoubtedly enabled us to learn many lessons. But we also have to have the honesty to say that the growth in enthusiasm and effort is not yet matched by significant measurable progress across our community. The progress that we all need, that we all desire, and that we're all striving for. So I want to take this opportunity for the next 10 minutes or so just to share with you why the conference theme of what works in diversity and inclusion is so important, both for me personally and for the Academy. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the work that we're doing to address it, to ensure that rigorous evidence-based approaches and impact measurement are at the heart of all of our programming. But before talking about that work, I just want to share a couple of examples of the insights that I've drawn from measurement that have influenced me and those that I'm working with over the last few years. So firstly, I thought I'd mention the Inclusive Cultures report that some of you were instrumental to creating and enabling to happen. It reviewed the experiences of nearly 7,000 engineers working across the UK. And for me, it was an incredibly important moment because it provided us with an evidence base to help people across our engineering community to understand how different it feels to work in engineering depending on who you are. It gave us, for the first time, some quantitative evidence that we could use to engage, especially with people in majority groups, on aspects of the culture in engineering, and to highlight this so-called inclusion privilege, whereby those who feel most included because they are in the majority groups may also feel least motivated to take action. So that was a pivotal moment for me. And the second example was the Hamilton Commission, which I co-chaired with Sir Lewis Hamilton in the course of 2020 and 2021. And as I'm sure many of you know, this sought to address the underrepresentation of black people in STEM roles in UK motorsport. The Academy was also the research partner for this, and I have to give a shout out here for Rhys Morgan and Johanna Scarlett, who I think worked their very socks off trying to make sure that we pull together the most complete set of statistics regarding the representation, the experience of young black people's progression through education into STEM that I have certainly yet seen anywhere. And it highlighted two very important things. First of all, that there are vital gaps in the data that's available to us that we need to fill if we are going to be able to tackle this systematically. And secondly, it highlighted the many dimensions of disadvantage and differential outcomes that Black Caribbean students in particular experience, including from their earliest engagement with STEM subjects. Now, everyone in the Commission went into this with their eyes open. We all knew the broad shape and scale of the problem, but it was just impossible not to be impacted by the hard truths told by those stats. The purpose of the Commission was to provide an evidence-based to guide action, and that's very much in line with the Academy's own approach in general, and indeed the theme of today's conference. So one of the Academy's 5 core values is excellence everywhere, and we define this as bringing evidence, expertise, integrity, and a passion for continuous improvement to everything that we do. Another of our values is, of course, creativity and innovation, which reflects our commitment to try new approaches, sometimes disruptive approaches, to tackling problems. But even when trying new things, that commitment to evidence and to measuring impact needs to run like a golden thread through everything that we do. Now, I need to stop myself getting carried away here and taking you through the rest of our Academy values. I love talking about our values. They're all relevant to today's discussion, in fact, but I'd better get back to my script before I start getting knowing looks from my colleagues in the front row here, keeping an eye on me, who've lovingly curated this conference and our agenda today. So we all know the old adage it's been mentioned today, which says, what gets measured gets managed, or indeed the favourite used by our Chief Operating Officer here, which is treasure what you measure. And the very fact that you're here at this conference speaks to your commitment to understanding what works, including through data and measurement. We also know the power of measurement to incentivise behaviours, and those can be unintended behaviours if not thoughtfully applied. And today we've heard eloquent reflections on how fiendishly difficult it is in the diversity and inclusion space to make sure that we're getting this right. It's a space which at its heart is about concepts of equity and equality and inclusion and belonging, which might sometimes seem quite hard things to pin down through measurement. But at the same time, we also know that there is a very clear evidence base now of the benefits of measuring diversity and inclusion dimensions. It helps businesses, it helps organisations to identify specifically what challenges they face and whether they're improving, whether the actions they're taking are actually leading to the results that they intended. It improves a business's reputation, credibility, employee attraction, retention, motivation, productivity, etc., etc. I don't need to tell you how important this all is. The fact that you're here speaks to the fact that you're committed to this. But at the Academy, we want to make sure that we are really bringing that spirit of focusing on the impact of measurement of diversity and inclusion initiatives through everything that we do in D&I. We want to be clear about the how, the what, and the why of what we're doing. So how in practice are we trying to do this? We're trying to make sure that embedded across all our work is a clear theory of change or impact logic model for all of our initiatives and programs, including making sure that the metrics we have can measure impact. And then we try to make sure that we use independent evaluation to be our honest broker to hold us to account, and to then ensure that the individual logic models and impact measurements actually underpin and drive progress towards our overarching goal of harnessing the power of engineering to build a sustainable society and an inclusive economy that works for everyone. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. I know time is quite short, so I've already talked about how we use Academy research to bring this to life through the Hamilton Commission. Monitoring diversity data is also incredibly important. So our This Is Engineering social media campaign, which aims to increase consideration of engineering careers by teenagers, has embedded within it a very, very robust approach to monitoring impact. And through this evaluation, we can see that not only has the campaign videos been viewed over 55 million times now by a largely gender-balanced audience of UK teenagers, but we can also see that it's including willingness to consider careers in engineering among those groups by up to 85% and by up to 118% among young people from minority ethnic groups and 129% amongst girls. We critically evaluate existing systems and processes through an inclusion lens. So we know, for example, that our own fellowship, our academy fellowship of over 1,600 leading engineers is not today sufficiently representative of the diversity of modern engineering. So last year we launched our Fellowship Fit for the Future campaign, whereby we've stated our intention for at least half of all the engineers that we elect each year from 2021 to 2026 to come from underrepresented groups. And I'm delighted to say that that aspiration was delivered in its first year. There's a lot of work to do to make sure that that converts into enduring and sustainable progress. And of course, that doesn't just mean setting yourself an aspiration, but actually making sure that all the processes and systems that underpin our membership processes do support delivery of that campaign goal. We also try to establish a clear baseline for new programming. So we heard the Diversity Inclusion Toolkit for SMEs referenced by Henrik earlier. And to make sure that what we were going to do was grounded in evidence, we've spent 6 months scoping, on scoping research and consultation. We looked at 38, no less, EDI toolkits, of which only 3 had been through any formal impact evaluation. So you won't be surprised to hear that we're making sure that our toolkit doesn't fall into the same trap. And we will be taking an evidence-led approach with evaluation and learning embedded from the outset. Toolkit will be launched later this year, so please do watch this space. So if you want to find out more about our programmes, we'll have Academy colleagues at the drinks afterwards. For those of you who are here in person, please do ask them about our newly launched Diversity Impact Programme or our award-winning JEEP programme for graduates from underrepresented groups, or how our progression framework supports PEIs to monitor diversity and inclusion in their communities. And at the same time, please keep sharing your diversity and inclusion successes with us. I can't resist mentioning that another of our Academy values is collaboration first, and that's because we start from the expectation that we can only achieve meaningful public benefit through working with partners, and we really appreciate the collaboration and partnership of so many of you and your organisations on this journey. So just to end my thoughts, 3 key lessons that we've learnt through the approach we've been taking. Firstly, we've learnt that we have to remain curious, creative and critical as we drive for knowledge. We have to challenge our assumptions, we have to test, evaluate and learn, and we have to be willing to innovate and take risks if progress stagnates. Secondly, we've learned that you need a plan to measure your progress by and to align your efforts. As leaders, we can all talk till we're blue in the face about the importance of diversity and inclusion in the workplace, but we need to make sure that the business case for the measurement of diversity and inclusion initiatives is really visible and real for people. Is success in diversity and inclusion really core to the way we define and measure organisational success? And finally, we've learnt that the path to date has not always been paved with robust evidence-based methodologies, and that critical evaluation of initiatives has sometimes been a bit of an afterthought. So we all have to work together to improve this, share our learning, hold one another accountable. And that's going to help us collectively drive towards the discovery, adoption and scaling of best practice in diversity and inclusion that in turn enables us to drive towards a more diverse and inclusive future. So on this note, please do consider your own roles as champions for diversity and inclusion in engineering. You are all very important to this. And make your own personal commitments to become change makers in your own context. As today has highlighted, we have lots to celebrate, lots to be proud of, but still so much more to do. And so I'm going to make sure we finish with one final poll. We have to continue in the spirit that we began the day with. So if I could ask the poll to be put up. Brilliant. So today's event inspired new ideas to approach diversity and inclusion in your organisation. Do you agree is the final poll? This is very important to us. You must be honest, but I hope it's going to be a positive story. And whilst you're just entering your responses, let me finish with an enormous thank you. Thank you so much for your engagement, your support and your commitment. And I would like to really thank our amazing cast of speakers today. What an incredible group of people we've had the privilege from hearing from, as well as our deeply engaged Academy Diversity and Inclusion Committee, chaired by Sarah Hainsworth, who you heard from earlier, and of course our brilliant diversity and inclusion team here, led by Polly Williams, who've worked so hard together with our events team to bring this all together. And before we head back for a drink, I'm going to hand you over to Joanna, but I'd like to do a final round of applause for all of you and for everyone who's helped bring this together. So thank you so much.